all the way my Savior leads me. Cheers each winding path I tread, gives me grace for every trial, feeds me with the living bread.
Good morning, Chester ARP Church Devotional Podcast. Thanks so much for being with us. 1 Samuel chapter 18, beginning in verse 12. Saul was afraid of David because the Lord was with him, but had departed from Saul. So Saul removed him from his presence and made him a commander of 1,000. And he went out and came before the people. And David had success in all his undertakings, for the Lord was with him. And when Saul saw that he had great success, he stood in fearful awe of him. But all Israel and Judah loved David, for he went out and came in before them. Then Saul said to David, "Here is my elder daughter Merab. I will give her to you for a wife. Only be valiant for me and fight the Lord's battles." For Saul thought, "Let not my hand be against him, but let the hand of the Philistines be against him." And David said to Saul, "Who am I, and who are my relatives, my father's clan in Israel, that I should be the son-in-law to the king?" But at the time when Merab, Saul's daughter, should be given to David, she was given to Adriel the Meholite for a wife. Now Saul's daughter Michal loved David, and they told Saul, and the thing pleased him. Saul thought, let me give her to him, that she may be a snare for him, and that the hand of the Philistines may be against him. Therefore Saul said to David a second time, "You shall now be my son-in-law." And Saul commanded his servants, "Speak to David in private, and say, Behold, the king has delight in you, and all his servants love you. Now become the king's son-in-law." And Saul's servant spoke these words in David's ears. And David said, "Does it seem to you a little thing to become the king's son-in-law, since I am a poor man and have no reputation?" And the servants of Saul told him, "Thus and so did David speak." And Saul said, "Thus shall you say to David, The king desires no bride price except for 100 foreskins of the Philistines, that he may be avenged of the king's enemies." Now Saul thought to make David fall by the hand of the Philistines. And when his servants told David these words, it pleased David well to be the king's son-in-law. Before the time had expired, David arose and went, along with his men, and killed 200 of the Philistines. And David brought their foreskins, which were given in full number to the king, that he might become the king's son-in-law. And Saul gave him his daughter Michal for a wife. But when Saul saw and knew that the Lord was with David, and that Michal, Saul's daughter, loved him, Saul was even more afraid of David. So Saul was David's enemy continually. Then the commanders of the Philistines came out to battle, and as often as they came out, David had more success than all the servants of Saul, so that his name was highly esteemed. Two things really I want to point out, really three things I want to point out in this simple passage here at the conclusion of 1 Samuel chapter 18. Verses 12 through 16, the first several verses I read, indicated and reminds us that the Spirit of the Lord is upon David, and the Spirit of the Lord has departed from Saul. The Spirit of the Lord departed from Saul after the Lord rejected him. Saul has evil spirits upon him, and David is the one who is able to soothe him through the playing of his instrument. He has tried to kill David twice, and Saul understands and knows that the Lord's hand is upon David. No one can have the victories that David has without the Lord's hand being upon him. And so Saul's remedy for this problem is to kill David. That's the second thing. Saul wants to kill David. And so Saul not only tries to kill David twice with his own spear, he says, "I'm going to put him out to battle multiple times in front of the Philistines." He concocts these different plans. The first has to do with his oldest daughter Merab, who was rightfully David's, given that Saul had promised to give his firstborn daughter to the man who killed Goliath. But yet Saul chose to give her to someone else, Adriel the Meholithite, for a wife. David misses out on that opportunity. But Saul's daughter Michal falls in love with David. And Saul says, "Here's the opportunity. I'll send him out to battle, and the Philistines will kill him." The Philistines are not successful. David is victorious because the hand of the Lord is with him. So Saul says, "We'll send him out of battle again. And I'll send him this time as being married to my daughter. And as he is, in a way to get prepared to be married to my daughter. Hopefully, the Philistines will kill him. He's got to get 200 foreskins from the Philistines. Uncircumcised men, battle warriors. He's got to defeat them, bring those foreskins back, and then he can have my daughter as a wife. And if he is successful against the Philistines, then I'll have my daughter, Michal, who will be a snare for him. She'll be the one who will kind of be the inroad into the family. She'll keep David close. She'll snitch, as it were, on David and give Saul information. And so Saul says, I'm going to use my daughter to trap him. See, we see Saul's conniving nature here, and his lack of faith, his lack of righteousness. And David goes out and does exactly what he's supposed to do. The Lord is with him. He brings the foreskins. He marries Michal. Saul finds out that his plan is not going to work. One, David is successful in the battlefield because of the Lord. Two, Michal's in love with David. And so she's not going to sell David out. She's going to sell her father out more quickly than she would sell David out. I think the thing that is so interesting here is we see David's persistence. We see David's faithfulness. We see Saul's desire to maintain his own power, his own influence, his arrogance, his conniving personality to try to kill off David rather than humbly submitting to the Lord. And so we see all of those things, and there's a comparison and a contrast there for us. We can learn not to do from Saul and learn what to do from David. But you also catch a little glimpse of something that's going to come back in David's life. David, as a young man, is a man after God's own heart. Later on, David will seek to cover up his own sin in fear that somehow he will lose his position of power and influence as the king, and he will send Uriah out to battle. And when Uriah refuses to go to battle, ultimately David arranges for his murder. God is not honored by that behavior. And it's interesting that what was done to David is what David will end up doing later, because David will be a man in his latter years who will be concerned with protecting his own reputation, be concerned with protecting his own position, be concerned with covering up the sin that he committed with Bathsheba. And so the answer here really for us as we think about it is to be humble, not just at the beginning of our lives, but all through our lives as we pursue the Lord and walk with him. You guys have a great day. God bless you. Have a great weekend. I'll see you next week. Remember, trust the Lord, walk with him, and know that character matters. Take care. See you soon.
You carry me close to your heart, and surely your goodness and mercy will find